Yeah, actually, I did. I taped some TV for age.
Oh, no, right. Yeah. Oh, the satellite broadcast.
Yeah. I think that was it. That was it. So how long have you worked for them?
I'm a freelancer. I've been here about 10 years now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, since college.
Okay.
So majored in Japanese. So shot straight over here after I graduated.
Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah, it's changed a lot. I was last year 10 years ago.
Was that right? That's one thing I have to get straight.
So, I mean, it's weird to come back after 10 years. It's not quite the same country. You know?
I leave for 2 weeks. It's not the same country when I come back. It changes fast.
Yeah, really. It's nice to be back there. I mean, it's nice to see that it's still, you know, I can imagine living here again if I needed to, or, you know, if I had the time. I mean, I might, you know.
That's the thing. I think most Americans can make the adjustment very easily. As long as it's Tokyo. If you get out in the sticks, it's a different story.
Yeah, it's a little different. Well, you know, Kyoto. I lived in Kyoto for like a year and a half, and Kyoto's a lot more provincial. And I don't know. We'll see. I'm going there this afternoon. I'll see what it's like now. But I used to, you know, I lived in Kitaku, in an area that, you know, probably hadn't seen many gaijin. And when I used to go to restaurants, the whole room would go silent, and you know, school kids would sort of follow me and point at me. And it was just in 10 years, even Tokyo has become a lot more international. I mean, it used to be the gaijin over here were, you know, mainly English teachers and didn't necessarily speak Japanese. Now you see a lot more foreigners. You know, they tend to be working in all kinds of capacities. They also tend to speak Japanese.
Absolutely.
Which is, you know, I see like in the, you know, cafes in Shibuya, I see, you know, these Americans and Europeans hitting on Japanese girls in Japanese,
yeah.
which is actually sort of a nice switch. I think. I'm not that, you know, I mean, mine is really rusty. I'm way out of practice now, but it's nice. What you do remember is, you know, useful. And it's changed a lot, but on the other hand, I could imagine coming again.
Yeah. What were you doing for that year and a half in Kyoto?
I was studying sort of a typical Kyoto gaijin. I was studying martial arts, Zen, teaching English, of course. And what else? I mean, you know, that was just. I was really interested in the old Japan. I was interested in the traditional arts. I was interested in, you know, everything that wasn't modern and new in Japan, and so that's why I was in Kyoto. And there were not a lot, but there was, you know, a certain community of people like me, kind of questing. You know, we weren't. The people questing in Tokyo now are essentially questing for bucks. As an American businessman said to me the other day, the money is just spilling out on the streets here, and I've come to scoop some of it up.
Eldorado.
And that's a different kind of quest. We were looking for enlightenment and new moral orientation, and God knows why, spiritual orientation. I mean, you know, it sounds in some ways very silly, but it was actually an interesting community, an interesting time of life. You know, we were all in our early 20s, but not all. But
you must have been taking like copious notes at the time, because you know, there's some very shrewd observations in Ransom that seemed rather fresh. I mean, because you wrote the book actually several years after you had left Japan, right?
Oh yeah, I was 3 years out of Japan when I wrote the. I never really took notes, but I guess I mean certain things. One of the reasons I wanted to write a book set in Kyoto is because the impressions were so vivid for me. I mean, being over here, you know, as an expatriate, I think it's often the case that, you know, everything seems a little more vivid and real because because it's not familiar, and because you're separated from you have to adjust your normal lazy modes of perception. It's like, you know, New York is getting a little old for me now because I've been there a little too long, and I don't see the things that are strange anymore. But when things are strange, they're really real, and it just does. My experience in Kyoto just kind of stayed with me. I really wanted to write a book about it.
When I told various people that I'd be interviewing you, they sort of had the same reaction. It's like, oh yeah, McInerney, the guy who wrote the Catch in the Rye book, and then the book about Japan, and then the book about sex.
They all said that?
No, why do they identify the third book as the book about sex? Well, what's the deal here?
I don't know. You're fascinating. Well, it's a lot. I mean, there is sex in the third. I mean, not particularly a lot of sex in my first two books. I decided to rectify that situation. The book is about a 20-year-old woman or girl, depending on your point of view, who likes to have sex, and it's sort of in America. It's still sort of women still aren't supposed to like sex. Some people have been shocked by. I mean, politically, we're all supposed to be very liberal, and feminism is supposed to have broken down all those barriers. It's still not true. Some people found the book, the frankness of the talk about sex in the book kind of shocking, which I couldn't be more pleased. I'd hate to write a book that put them to sleep, but I just, I was partly interested in exploring the myth that men are more frank and open and honest about sex than women, which I don't think is true. Men lie about sex, and women don't have as many reasons to lie about sex. And I think younger women, if they still have a tight group of friends, they talk in a very frank and open way. I was also interested in the idea that after feminism, there's still a kind of a way in which women have to try to define their roles without. One obvious solution is to copy men. Like I'll be an aggressive asshole too because men are aggressive assholes, and that is one way to approach sexuality too. More is better, and treat the sort of exchange or that transaction as kind of conquest, or so those are some of the things that I was exploring. I was also writing about and in a sense, Bright Lights is about this sort of, looked at in one way, it's somewhat about the beginning of the 80s, and Story of My Life's about the end of the 80s, and about a kind of fairly extreme decadence that I feel has set in our culture, and it's most evident in New York.
Yeah, the decadence you wrote about in Bright Lights is limited to a very, very small segment of the population.
Not in New York. Well, you look at the statistics for the country. 30 million Americans, 40 million Americans have tried cocaine. How small a percentage is that? It's now a totally middle-class phenomenon. It's not, the sort of hip and young and restless have moved on somewhere else, but it's really the middle class that sort of adopted all of that. And we're just now sort of coming out of a period of sort of cocaine narcosis in the country. Now, unfortunately, it's gone. Crack has the ghettos, the poor and the underprivileged are the population that's really suffering now. But I don't know how limited that was in. I would say not that limited. Nobody had talked about it. Nobody brought it above ground as late as 1984 when I published Bright Lights. But as soon as I did, I couldn't go. I couldn't even go to Kansas without sort of having people tell me that was the way they were living.
Is that right? Yeah. When did you aspire to become a man of letters?
Most of my life, I think when I was 15 was when I really decided to become a writer. Yeah, I read Dylan Thomas and really fell in love with the language. It's the main thing that I've wanted to do, and it still is. I actually like my work. I feel sorry for people who don't. But I can't imagine doing. Maybe I'm not competent at anything else. I'm very bad at working in organizations, as I've proved on several occasions.
Checkered past.
Yeah, well, yeah. I have a really checkered career or employment record, not career record, because I always wanted my career to be writing. But when you decide to be a writer, you still have to decide to support yourself either for a while or, as is more often the case, for the rest of your life, because most writers never make much money. Most novelists, most fiction writers.
I can kind of figure out on my own why you would write a book like Bright Lights. At least I think I can, and why you would write Ransom. You're in Japan, but why Story of My Life? What was there any one experience or like one relationship that kind of put you over the top to be cheeky enough to write about a story about a woman in the first person singular?
Well, I overheard a conversation one night, which just sort of started to inspire me. It was, what I always look for, or one of the things I look for is a voice, sort of the language that a story might be told in, because it seems to me what's interesting about any story from a writer's point of view is how it's told and how it sounds, rather than what the story. I mean, even Romeo and Juliet is a silly, cliched story if in the wrong hands. In fact, it's definitely a silly, cliched story. Hey, in Shakespeare's hand, comes alive. So what happened was that I heard this conversation when I was sitting at a table, and at the next table, all these young women talking about all kinds of things, including sex. But what first intrigued me was that I suddenly recognized this dialect that no one really has ever identified as a dialect, but that's kind of what it is. This way of talking, using the word like almost every other word, and you don't use the speech verbs are goes instead of says.
It's from the Valley Girl.
It's all it was kind of popularized as that, but it's completely nationwide. It's not it's not a phenomenon limited to the San Fernando Valley, and nor for that matter is the way these girls speak quite that particular kind of speech. But I hear it everywhere. I even hear it I go to Canada and I hear it, that kind of talk, and it's all present tense. And so I first got interested, for all of its limitations, I thought it was kind of an interesting dialect, and I'd never really seen it written down. And secondly, I was just interested in the way these women were talking about sex. It just really intrigued me. They were so, blatant.
Was it at a restaurant or something?
Yeah, it was at a restaurant. And then it just so happened that this friend of mine was, one of his cousins was sitting at the table, and he walked by and introduced me to these girls, and I sat down and listened to them for about 3 hours. And I said, well, it was a few weeks later that suddenly I woke up, and I had a picture of this girl that would speak this way, and it was kind of, all these girls sort of contributed a little bit to that idea. And but I'd been meeting them in nightclubs and all over New York for years anyway. And these, 16-year-old jaded girls who, by the time they have their 18th birthday party, they already know everybody in New York, They've slept with half of them. And it just strikes me that, Allison is something of a representative. I wanted her to be a representative figure of a certain kind of outer edge of the depravity of the age, if you will.
You're on a home stretch here, Guy. Popularity in Japan. I just read Bright Lights the other day because I'm no big literature reader. I usually interview musicians. Picked up the book. I'd already read Ransom, by the way. I felt compelled as an old Japan hand to read it.
Yeah.
So I picked up Bright Lights and read it, and I guess what made the book for me there were two things. It was the tale of sort of emotional overhaul. I like that. The other thing was the humor. I kind of cackled through it. Now, I also picked up the Japanese translation.
Yeah, I want to hear about this.
Yeah, that was the
I hear that it's not funny at all.
Yeah, no, it's more. You can identify with the guy because he's having obviously a very dismal time of it. He's really struggling.
That'd be horrible without the humor. I mean,
Exactly.
I don't know if I'd want to read Bright Lights, Big City if it wasn't funny.
That's what fuels it to the end there. So I've been asking.
It sounds like the movie,
Yeah, I agree completely.
I'm sorry. I must say you're not the first person to mention this, and in fact, when one Japanese critic said to me before I came over, somebody I met in New York said, what's all this about you being funny? He said, I don't think Bright Lights Big City is funny.
Yeah.
That was when I first got a little alarmed.
So what do they see in you? Do they see kind of the hip yuppie New Yorker and the new...
God, well, that's, I wish I knew what the book actually was like in translation, and I could answer that question better. I think the Japanese are always fascinated by New York, naturally. They're fascinated with America in general and with pop culture in particular. With New York in particular, I think, some people might pick it up for its more sensational aspects, for this, idea, look at these crazy Americans, how bad they are. I think that's often why any of us pick up a book is to sort of peek into another life, preferably one that's more interesting and horrible than our own. But I'm not entirely sure. You've been here 10 years. Do you have any theories?
Like I said, I think it's the New York aspect.
But I also think, but I like to think, people do like to read about, this sort of coming of age novel in the right hands is always, an interesting story. That we've all had some kind of experience of loss. We've all had the experience of, trying to make the transition to adulthood. I like to think there are universal aspects of the book which account for the other half of the sales, which is, who can't identify with somebody who's lost a parent, or somebody who's lost a lover or a spouse, or somebody who's trying to, who hates his job and is trying to figure out how to keep it and loses it anyway. Loss is a universal experience, and I hope that's what makes the book go the distance in Japan. I'm sure lots of people pick it up for the wrong reasons. But.
Why was the movie so unfunny in spite of your script writing?
They were afraid to, I think what it was there was a fear of glorifying a dangerous lifestyle. I really think that's what it was. Hollywood is very prudish. And they were terribly afraid that they'd be accused of glamorizing drug abuse.
They did a pretty bad job of covering that up, though.
Yeah.
Kind of glamorized.
I don't think it was a terrible movie, it just wasn't very funny.
No, it wasn't funny at all. Then that was the main problem.
Yeah, and the book is, it's one of the, if I value anything about the book, I suppose it would be the humor. And it's not really quite there. I hope so. I hear Story of My Life translation is much more humorous.
Oh, is that right?
In Japanese, I hope.
Just getting the old heave over here.
Yeah, you're getting the hook. You're at the door.
Well, I'll watch your speech.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, you'll get
Thanks for the
more than you need. I don't really even know. I had a prepared speech, but I left that at home. So
well, we'll see.
What is that?
Okay. Yeah. See ya.
Thanks so much.
Okay, well,
What would you think?
Just one.